When did you last think a thought that was truly yours? Not something you absorbed from social media, not an opinion borrowed from the crowd, not a belief inherited from your tribe, but a genuine, original thought born from the depths of your own contemplation? If you're struggling to answer, you're not alone. You're standing at the edge of humanity's most dangerous precipice, the death of critical thinking. If this resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. By the end of this journey, you'll become a different person, someone who thinks rather than someone who is thought for. Stay until the end and share your awakening in the comments below. You wake up each morning and reach for your phone before your feet touch the ground. Within minutes, your mind is flooded with the thoughts of strangers, their outrage, their fears, their carefully crafted opinions designed to make you react, not reflect. And somewhere in this digital deluge, you disappear. Carl Jung warned us of this very moment when he spoke of the collective unconscious becoming a collective unconsciousness. We have become what he called unconscious participants in the mass mind, zombies walking through life, thinking we're thinking when we're merely echoing. The pain you feel, that knowing sense of emptiness, that feeling of being lost in a crowd of 7 billion is not accidental. It is the natural consequence of surrendering your most sacred gift, your ability to think for yourself. Consider this. When was the last time you sat in complete silence for an hour? When did you last read a book that challenged your worldview instead of confirming it? When did you last disagree with your social group and stand by that disagreement despite the discomfort? The modern world has weaponized your need for belonging against your need for truth. Social media algorithms feed you information that feels good, not information that is good. News outlets profit from your emotional reactions, not your rational responses. Your peer groups reward conformity, not authenticity. And slowly, imperceptibly, you begin to mistake the voice of the crowd for the voice of wisdom. Nietzsche foresaw this when he wrote about the herd mentality, the way human beings, in their desperate need for security and acceptance, surrender their individual will to the collective will. But what happens when the collective itself has lost its way? What happens when the blind are leading the blind? You become what Jung called a splinter of the infinite, disconnected from your own depths, floating aimlessly in the shallow waters of popular opinion. The first step toward reclaiming your mind is recognizing this pain for what it is, not personal failure, but spiritual starvation. Your soul is hungry for truth, and you've been feeding it lies disguised as wisdom. To understand how we arrived at this collective stupidity, we must examine the invisible architecture that shapes our thoughts, the systems that profit from our mental laziness and emotional reactivity. Machiavelli understood that power is most effective when it's invisible. Today's princes don't rule from thrones. They rule from server farms, manipulating your attention, your emotions, and ultimately, your thoughts. They have discovered something more powerful than physical chains, psychological ones. The modern world has created what Jung would call a cultural complex, a shared psychological pattern that operates below the level of consciousness, shaping how entire populations think and behave. This complex has several key components. First, the illusion of information. You consume more data in a day than your ancestors consumed in a lifetime, yet you know less about yourself than ever before. Information without reflection becomes noise. Knowledge without wisdom becomes confusion. You mistake being informed for being intelligent, not realizing that intelligence requires the courage to think slowly, deeply, and independently. Second, the cult of instant gratification. Critical thinking requires patience, the ability to sit with uncertainty, to hold contradictory ideas in tension, to resist the urge to reach for easy answers. But modern life is designed to eliminate patience. Every question must have an immediate answer, every problem an instant solution, every uncertainty a quick resolution. This has atrophied your capacity for deep thought, like a muscle that's never used. Third, the weaponization of emotion. Those who wish to control you have learned that emotional people don't think, they react. So they keep you perpetually angry, afraid, outraged, or excited. They understand what Nietzsche knew, that strong emotions make weak minds. When you're emotionally triggered, your prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, goes offline, and your primitive brain takes over. Fourth, the echo chamber effect. You're surrounded by people who think like you, consume media that confirms your biases, and algorithms that show you only what you already believe. This creates the illusion that your opinions are universal truths, removing any incentive to examine them critically. Jung called this psychological inflation, the dangerous belief that your limited perspective represents absolute reality. But perhaps most insidiously, there's the shame of independent thought. Society has made thinking for yourself a form of betrayal of your tribe, your family, your identity group. To question the consensus is to risk rejection, ridicule, or worse. So most people choose comfort over truth, belonging over authenticity, the warmth of the crowd over the cold clarity of independent thought. This is how critical thinking dies, not through prohibition, but through seduction. You're offered something seemingly valuable: connection, validation, certainty, in exchange for something invaluable: your mental sovereignty. The tragedy is that most people don't even realize the trade they've made. To reclaim your mind, you must first withdraw from the systems that have colonized it. This is not about becoming a hermit. It's about becoming conscious of your own consciousness, learning to distinguish between thoughts that arise from your depths and thoughts that are imposed from without. Jung spoke of the necessity of individuation, the process by which a person becomes who they truly are, rather than who they've been conditioned to be. This process begins with what I call conscious unavailability, the deliberate practice of making yourself unavailable to the forces that seek to think for you. Physical withdrawal. Create sacred spaces and sacred times where the noise of the world cannot reach you. This might mean turning off your phone for hours at a time, spending time in nature without distractions, or simply sitting in silence with your own thoughts. Your mind, like a wound, needs quiet to heal. Informational withdrawal. Stop consuming information passively. Instead of scrolling mindlessly through social media or watching the news out of habit, approach information like a detective approaches evidence, with skepticism, curiosity, and purpose. Ask yourself, why am I being shown this? Who benefits from me believing this? What am I not being told? Social withdrawal. This is perhaps the most difficult, but most necessary practice. You must learn to withdraw from conversations that are not conversations at all, but mere exchanges of borrowed opinions. You must become comfortable with not having an opinion on everything, with admitting ignorance, with saying, I don't know, in a world that demands certainty. Nietzsche wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe." This struggle requires what he called noble solitude, not the loneliness of the outcast, but the sovereignty of the self-possessed. In this solitude, something miraculous begins to happen. You start to hear your own voice again. Not the voice that echoes the crowd, not the voice that seeks approval, but the voice that arises from your deepest knowing, what Jung called the voice of the self. This voice is often quiet at first, easily drowned out by the cacophony of external influences. But as you practice withdrawal, as you create space for authentic thought, this voice grows stronger. It begins to offer insights that no algorithm could generate, wisdom that no influencer could package, truths that no ideology could contain. Emotional withdrawal. You must also learn to withdraw your emotional energy from the dramas and outrage cycles that keep your mind in a state of reactivity. Every time you get caught up in collective anger, fear, or excitement, you're not thinking, you're being thought by forces beyond your control. This doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means becoming like a clear mountain lake calm on the surface, profound in its depths. It means developing what the Stoics called emotional sovereignty, the ability to feel deeply while thinking clearly. The goal of withdrawal is not to escape the world, but to return to it with your own mind intact. To engage with reality from a place of centeredness rather than reactivity, wisdom rather than opinion, authenticity rather than conformity. This is the path of the conscious individual, the one who thinks their own thoughts and lives their own life. From the chrysalis of conscious withdrawal emerges something rare in today's world. A mind that thinks independently, a heart that feels authentically, a soul that moves according to its own inner compass. This is what Jung called the individuated self, not the ego that seeks validation from others, but the self that validates itself through alignment with truth. This is what Nietzsche meant by the Barmensch, not a superior being, but a self-overcoming being, one who has transcended the need for external authority. When you reclaim your capacity for critical thinking, you discover something that those who would control you desperately want you not to know. You are more powerful than they are. Their power depends on your unconsciousness, your reactivity, your willingness to let them think for you. The moment you begin thinking for yourself, their power begins to crumble. But this is not power over others. That is the power of the ego, the power that corrupts and destroys. This is power with yourself, power from yourself, what Machiavelli would recognize as true virtue, not mere cunning or force, but the alignment of will, wisdom, and action. The power of discernment. You begin to see through the manipulation, the propaganda, the emotional manipulation that once controlled you. You develop what Jung called psychological sight, the ability to see not just what is being said, but why it's being said, who benefits from your believing it, and what agenda might be hiding behind apparent truth. The power of emotional regulation. No longer do you react automatically to triggers designed to bypass your rational mind. You feel emotions deeply, but don't let them hijack your thinking. You respond rather than react, choose rather than get chosen for. The power of authentic relationship. When you stop being a mirror of others' expectations, you become interesting to be around. People are drawn to authenticity, like plants to sunlight, even if they can't name what they're experiencing. Your relationships become based on truth rather than performance, depth rather than surface agreement. The power of creative thought. With your mind freed from the constant noise of borrowed opinions, space opens up for original thinking, creative solutions, genuine insights. You become a source of new ideas rather than a recycler of old ones. This rebirth is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. Every day, you must choose again. Will you think your own thoughts or let others think them for you? Will you feel your own feelings or let them be manufactured by external forces? Will you live your own life or let it be lived for you by the invisible algorithms of conformity? Jung warned that individuation is a lonely path, not because you end up alone, but because you must walk it alone. No one can think your thoughts for you, not even the wisest teacher, not even the most loving guide. The responsibility for your own mind rests with you and you alone. But in accepting this responsibility, you discover the most profound freedom possible, the freedom to be yourself in a world that profits from your unconsciousness. As we near the end of this journey together, I want to leave you not with answers, but with questions, the kind of questions that live inside you long after this video ends, that whisper to you in quiet moments, that refuse to be satisfied with easy responses. Who benefits when you stop thinking for yourself? Look around your life and notice which institutions, which people, which systems seem to encourage your mental passivity. Which voices get louder when you start questioning? Which relationships become uncomfortable when you begin thinking independently? What are you afraid of discovering about yourself? Often, we avoid deep thinking not because it's difficult, but because we're terrified of what we might find. Are you afraid of being wrong about something important? Afraid of having to change? Afraid of the loneliness that comes with seeing clearly? How much of your identity is actually yours? Look at your beliefs, your values, your goals, your dreams. How many of them did you choose consciously? And how many did you inherit unconsciously? How many serve your authentic self? And how many serve the version of you that others want you to be? These questions are not meant to be answered quickly. They are meant to be lived with, wrestled with, grown into over time. They are what Jung called numinous questions, questions that carry transformative power that change you in the very asking. The path of critical thinking is ultimately the path of self-discovery. When you learn to think clearly, you learn to see yourself clearly. When you learn to question external authorities, you learn to trust your inner authority. When you learn to separate truth from manipulation, you learn to separate your authentic self from your conditioned self. But this path requires courage, the courage to be disliked, to be misunderstood, to stand alone when necessary. It requires what Nietzsche called the courage of your own thoughts, the willingness to think what needs to be thought, even when it's inconvenient or unpopular. Most people will never take this path. They will remain comfortable in their unconsciousness, secure in their borrowed opinions, safe in their unexamined beliefs. And there's a certain mercy in this, the mercy of never having to face the full responsibility of your own existence. But you are not most people. Something in you stirred when you began watching this video. Something recognized itself in these words. That something is your authentic self, calling you home to your own mind, your own heart, your own truth. The question is, will you answer that call? The journey of reclaiming your critical thinking is not a destination, but a practice, what Nietzsche called the eternal return, the continuous choice to become who you are rather than who you've been told to be. Every morning, you wake up to the same choice, consciousness or unconsciousness, authenticity or performance, your thoughts or their thoughts. The forces that seek to colonize your mind never sleep, never rest, never stop trying to seduce you back into mental passivity. But now you know something they hoped you would never discover. You have a choice. Integration means making this choice sacred. It means treating your mind like the temple it is, your thoughts like the prayers they are, your attention like the gift it is. It means recognizing that in a world full of people who have surrendered their capacity to think, your thinking is an act of rebellion, your questioning an act of love, your consciousness an act of revolution. Integration means embracing the paradox. You must be strong enough to stand alone, yet open enough to learn from others. Skeptical enough to question everything, yet humble enough to admit when you're wrong. Independent enough to think for yourself, yet wise enough to recognize the insights of those who have walked this path before you. Jung taught that the goal of individuation is not to become isolated from humanity, but to become truly useful to it. When you think clearly, you help others see clearly. When you refuse to be manipulated, you weaken the systems of manipulation for everyone. When you live authentically, you give others permission to do the same. Integration means understanding that this work never ends. There is no graduation from the school of consciousness, no final diploma in critical thinking. There are only deeper levels of awareness, subtler forms of conditioning to recognize, more sophisticated manipulations to see through. But this is not a burden, it's a gift. It means that growth never stops, that discovery never ends, that you can always become more yourself than you were yesterday. As you leave this video and return to your life, carry with you this simple practice. Before accepting any thought as true, ask yourself 3 questions. Where did this thought come from? Who benefits from my believing this? Does this serve my highest good and deepest truth? These questions are your compass, your protection, your path back to yourself whenever you find yourself lost in the wilderness of other people's opinions. Remember, in a world that profits from your unconsciousness, consciousness is the ultimate act of defiance. In a society that rewards conformity, authenticity is the highest form of courage. In a time when thinking has become dangerous, Those who think clearly become essential. You are not here by accident. Your consciousness is not a coincidence. Your capacity for independent thought is not a luxury. It's a responsibility, not just to yourself, but to the future of human wisdom itself. The question that began this journey was, when did you last think a thought that was truly yours? Now I leave you with a different question, one that will shape the rest of your life. What will you do with the thoughts that are truly yours? The world is waiting for your answer. Thank you for taking this journey with me. If this video opened something in you, if it stirred that part of you that remembers what it means to think freely, please share it with someone who needs to remember the same. Like this video if it served your awakening. Subscribe if you want to continue this conversation. And most importantly, share your thoughts, your questions, your own awakening in the comments below. Your voice matters. Your thoughts matter. You matter. Until we meet again in the realm of authentic thought, keep questioning, keep growing, keep becoming who you truly are.